but it is 6:30, so let's start the meeting. And we do a roll call, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Here.
Mrs. Rogers?
Here.
Mr. Roach? Mrs. Barney?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Durig?
Here.
Mr. Nicholas?
Here.
Mr. Brett?
Here.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the February 20th, 2024 minutes. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda, let me just give a quick preamble here. In the March 4th Board of Supervisors for Cecil Township meeting, there was a motion to approve a $100 payment to any member of the staff who would perform specific duties, and I just wanted to make sure that we have it on our agenda to ratify, as well as a portion of this will be coming out of the Cecil Township Municipal Authority budget. So I will, since I was at the meeting, I will make the motion authorizing payment of $100 per meeting for township employees who attend township-sanctioned meetings for the purpose of opening and closing of the building for each meeting and recording and posting meetings on the Cecil Township website and YouTube. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, the next motion is, do I hear a motion to authorize the letter to M&T Trust Company in regards to capital improvements and redemption of fund transfers? Do we need any explanation on that prior?
Basically, what that is when we do the 2016 bond payment or the 2017 bond payment, if there are any additional funds left over from that payment, we can transfer it to the capital improvement fund. But when we do the transfer, we have not had any funds left over, so there is nothing to transfer, but we still need to just send a letter saying that there is nothing to be transferred at this time.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, the engineer's report, please.
Yes, good evening. Quick update on the Lawrence project. Work is progressing quite well on the collection system. About 80% of the sewers have been constructed, so they're down to the last little bit of sewers. We did have a meeting with the township on alleys A, B, and C, and those alleys had less asphalt than the other alleys, and there's nothing left edge to edge. So the contract had in it for 7 foot of paving for trench restoration. These alleys were about 10 feet, Mike? That
Yes.
sound about right?
Yes.
So there's about 3 foot that's gonna need paved additional. We met with the township just to see what projects, if any, they had planned, because we didn't want to put full restoration back and then a stormwater project or something. They confirmed there was nothing planned for these areas, so the contractor's gonna repave the whole alley for an additional 3 foot. We asked for a price to see where they would be. They said it's about 20,000 more. We have unit prices in the contract, so based on what was there, that's a pretty good price for the project. We're under on some other quantities, so I think it'll shake out okay. As we go, we're going to have to meet with the township on restoration and make sure they're satisfied when we're done, because we originally thought we were going to have to repave quite a bit of the area, and now it sounds like the trench restoration is going to be acceptable in a lot of areas. So once our contractor's done, we'll be able to go back in with the township and make sure, and then get a sign off on what they want there.
When's your next meeting with township?
We didn't schedule it yet. We had
Okay.
a walkthrough with their Public Works. for those 3 alleys, because the contractor wants to get paving the next few weeks here to get them cleaned up, so.
Okay.
But we expect him to be finished with the line work over the next, 6 weeks, Larry?
Yeah,
thought?
right now, he's saying they have another job, end of April, so they'd like to be finished up by mid-April. If the weather stays the way it's been, it looks like they'll stay on target, because I think they've only may have gotten 3 or 4 days of rain that they got washed out, and they only lost that 1 week in January when it was bitterly cold that they couldn't work. So this whole project, they've been able to continue to work with no delay. So if everything goes well, they should be finished as they plan.
Was part of your meeting about the stormwater plan that we had heard was going to be completed by Cecil Township?
They did discuss, we did ask that question, and it doesn't sound like there's anything currently planned. Although it was presented at the public meeting
Right, town
that we
hall.
had at the fire hall, or at the
Civic.
Civic Center, that they were going to have a project following ours, but I do not believe that's the case. At this point, doesn't impact us, but we do want to make sure that our restoration, once we're done, is finished.
Okay.
Next is the plant. Works completed this month was completion of the control building exterior. They're continuing on work on the interior painting, electrical HVAC, electrical works, control panels, underground utilities, and the SBR airlines. So work is progressing there. We have requested a schedule from them for when the plant's going to, the rest of the equipment's going to come in and it'll go online. So hopefully by next month they provide that. So Larry's been leaning on them to get that, but they have a couple things they don't have delivery dates on yet. So.
Yeah, I think it's been the electrical. The electrical's been the holdup, is the MCC centers.
Yes.
And then I think it's a couple of things for the conversion of Teodori to the pump station.
Correct.
So that's until we get that schedule, I know we've had residents wanting to know when they're going to be able to tie in, but we can't give them a firm date or give them more information until we know when the plant's going to be online, or a tentative date. Then we can have a meeting to say, okay, this is the schedule for tie-in. But without knowing when that equipment's coming, it's hard to firm anything up.
Yeah, and once we get that schedule, we'll come back to a meeting and get with Mike, and we'll have a suggestion on that, because some of the connections are in the old system, so they go to the current treatment plant, so they could connect earlier in the sequence than the ones that go to the new plant only. So
Okay.
we can look at a phased approach, because that may help the residents too, so that there's not so many at one time. They may get a better price from contractors if there's not a huge, 6 months that they all going to be tied in. So, but once we do get that schedule, we'll come back with that.
Okay.
And then there is the two pay requests and then the Penvest on your agenda as written. Any questions?
Good.
That's all I
Okay.
have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so regarding contract number 2017-06, rebid construction of sanitary sewers and appurtenances, do I hear a motion to approve partial payment number 10 in the amount of $405,059.68?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Regarding contract number 21-STP1, rebid Village of Lawrence sewage treatment plant, do I hear a motion to approve a partial payment number 9 in the amount of $258,937.36?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
I would like to make the motion to approve Penvest payment requisition number 10 in the amount of $714,586.42. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor's report, please.
Thank you. In addition to the written report, I have two items that I'd ask the chair to consider for executive session. And one being the progress and update on the pending CHJ litigation, and the other being property acquisition attendant to the Lawrence project. I discussed both with our manager, and I think both of us would reserve comment on that until we get into executive session. And I guess that would join with the manager's request for personnel as well in executive session. So I'd defer till that point.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nicholas this time? Okay. Business managers report.
Okay, your packets included the January 2024 financial reports. Any questions? Nope. Right, second item, there was an issue with our data that came through for February and March for billing that we received from PA American Water. When we received the data in February, the majority of the reads were estimates. We went ahead and billed for the amount that was downloaded into our system. When we got the data in March, there were several adjustments and canceled rebills. The majority of the customers who had estimated reads were rebilled for the same amount. Due to this, we were receiving 2 or 3 reads for each customer. I worked with the billing clerk during March's billing to help her review and correct all of the accounts that were affected by this. According to PA American Water, this was due to a proration issue. In order for them to be in compliance, they needed to rebill the customers whose data was a part of this. The majority of the customers would bill the correct usage with PA American Water. They were just not billed the correct dollar amount. And I also brought our data just to
Share
show.
that. Yeah.
This is our data from March.
They had to go through each and every
Highlighted.
one.
Is the one we had to go through and review each one that was highlighted and fix.
No, I don't want that.
Why don't
Thank
we
you.
have them included in our packet?
We don't want to kill any trees, that's why.
It was fun. Right, next item was the CD renewals. I renewed CD 00-130-10664 and 00-130-13254 for 12 months at 4.81% interest and a yield of 5%. This is on tonight's agenda to be ratified. And then the audit, Mark Turnley emailed over the 2023 audit punch list, and I have started getting the items he has requested pulled and ready for the audit. That's it.
Okay. All right, so we have a couple of motions. Motion to ratify the renewal of CD number 00-1313, 13013-254 with Slovenian Savings for 1 year at the new interest rate of 4.81% with a yield of 5% with no penalty for early withdrawal. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
And we have a motion to ratify renewal of CD number 00-130-10664 with Slovenian Savings for 1 year at the new interest rate of 4.81% with a yield of 5% with no penalty for early withdrawal. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Authority managers report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under old business, items 1, the NPDES permit renewals. We're still waiting for comment from DEP. Have not heard anything back. Item 2, Silver Creek Development has addressed all outstanding technical comments. Remaining items are administrative. We're waiting to hear back from the developer. They did reach out, and they wanted to make a couple of minor changes, so they were told to resubmit the plans with what they want to do for the changes. And also, I guess there's a couple questions that I spoke with Kevin before the meeting. I'm going to get him a set of plans for Miller's Run wastewater treatment plant so he can take a look at it. And then once we can see what's going on there, I will update the board on that.
What, there's, that, how many units there, living units, are like 60, 70?
242 homes. That's the big plan up above. That's the Miranda to Silver Creek. They won't come on all at one point in time, but that's a pretty big plan. So originally, when I started, they were planning for 232, and they found a way to put 10 more in. So they moved some stuff around. So it's a pretty big development. LSSE had put together a letter to the Traditions of America for the remaining items for Phase 5, some of the things with the drawings and a couple of quantities for the maintenance bond. We have not heard anything back from TOA. I will reach out to them to see where they're at with that. Basically, once they clean all that up, I can put it on the agenda for acceptance. The ball's in their court. Gerber Collision is looking to modify the property at 55 Mayview Road. They submitted plans for review. LSSE had reviewed, sent a comment letter with concerns on February 9th. We received a revised drawing and comment letter. Copies were forwarded to LSSE. In the process, it looks like in the metal shop, they are saying that there are no changes to the existing plumbing. But our concern is if there are floor drains in there, they should have an oil and water separator, so it's up to them to show us that there is no, floor drains. So that's where we're at with that, and we'll go back and forth until we get an answer. Item 5, LNS Wastewater contacted the authority about the possibility of acquiring the treatment plant collection system known as the Monaco plan. As we informed you last month, a letter was sent asking for additional information. We have not received any response on that, so we will just wait until we hear something. Under new business, I had mentioned last month about converting the existing dialers from landlines over to cloud-based and cellular service. We had a couple dialers, again, that the phone lines acted up on, but the Georgetown auto dialer has failed. We had the phone line checked. It is not the issue. The unit just has seen better days. The new dialer is cloud-based, uses cellular service instead of a landline. The Sentinel unit is $1,616.95 plus a yearly cellular subscription. $335.95. This may have increased. I've seen it on another site where it seems like it went up to $400, but it's still cheaper than what we're paying for a landline. We pay about $800 a year for the landline, so you're saving on that. So I am going to replace that unit and see how it works. I did attach the specs, but what's nice about this is it'll be able to email, text, however we want to send it out, phone call, but the guys will be able to see exactly what the alarm is by logging into their phone. They can go right on the cloud base and see stations and alarm and see what the condition is. So it should be nice.
Efficient,
Yes.
yeah.
We had some dialers for the various process equipment motors fail at Miller's Run. Replacements have been ordered for these units that failed, and I ordered a couple spares to make sure we have them in case there is another failure, because these units are now 15, 16 years old. Basically, the problem is with the supply chain after COVID, a lot of this stuff that used to be 2-3 days shipping out, now you're talking 2-3 weeks. It ships directly from the manufacturer. People don't keep it on the shelf. So, but I just got an email here before I left to come to the meeting. They should ship on Thursday, so we should have them fairly quickly. It doesn't affect the process. We just let them run all the time. So it's not like it affects the process. Item 3, the spring heavy user maintenance plan for PennDOT is due by 4/1. We did this in the fall, so we have to do it again for moving equipment in and out to the site. I'm in the process of completing and submitting. Pretty much it's just updating what was there in the fall for the spring, and we'll submit that, and I'll copy LSSE on it. I don't think there's anything that is out of the ordinary with it. Item 4, I think a review of the authority's computer system and network should be considered with all the cyber attacks that we've been reading that are ongoing in the news, and we want to make sure that our data and network are up to date and secure. I'm not sure if we have any type of coverage in our insurance policy, but it can't hurt to see if there is adequate insurance in case there is an event. You know, like you said, again, you want to say the chances of getting hacked are slim to none, but we had a big problem when the county got hacked down there with the
Yeah.
Register of Deeds. It took almost 2 months to be able to start to get back up, to go back and start getting stuff registered. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're covered, so.
I just want to add,
Aliquippa, wasn't Aliquippa that just was hacked?
Equipa was hacked back in end of December, beginning of January. It was in the Aruba Today newspaper, right on the front page.
And if you don't, I'm sorry.
Then after that is whenever
Who's managing our system now
courthouse.
currently?
Joe Ziska is managing our system. He manages the townships as well.
Okay. So it's an internal function?
Yes. Yeah, it's just to make sure that we have the firewalls and things like that, because we don't accept payments. That goes through a secure port, so it's not like that on that end. We're handling
That's
any
good.
of that.
This
But
sensitive personal information is on
Right.
a secure port.
But it's still, there is sensitive information there that we want to make sure that, you know, we are covered adequately.
Hey, Mike, just to let you know, one of our other authorities just got an insurance quote for that coverage. Just to give you perspective, it was probably around $2,200 annually. So I don't know, if you don't already have it and you're comparing prices, I can share a couple others with you, but that's
That's fine. I would like to, you know, get prices. I just want to make sure that whatever coverage we have, if we do have it in the policy, and I think there is something there, I just want to make sure it's adequate for our specific needs, that we're not paying for something that we don't need instead of paying for something that we need. You know, that's what I want to make sure of. We're having a couple issues with the company cell phones that are issued to the employees. One phone has had an issue with the operating system, and it continually reboots and shuts off randomly. The other phone is starting to have issues charging the battery. I'm going to explore whether these issues can be fixed, and while I'm there, I'll take a look at what the current offers that are available, if they would need to be replaced. Tonight, we have the annual waste load management reports for 2023. They've been completed. Last year, I worked with Walt on those just to learn about how we did them here. He worked with me again in preparing the reports. They just need to be signed this evening to be submitted to DEP. They're due by the end of the month.
Did they need to be signed by a PE as well as
No,
board?
they just need to be signed by a board member and myself.
Okay.
The auditor submitted the engagement letter that needs to be executed for the 23 financial audit. And this is the standard engagement letter that we sign every year, so I have it here this evening to sign. This way he can get started with that process. Robinson Pike.
Previously approved him as the auditor.
Yes,
Yeah.
we approved him at the reorganization meeting as the auditor for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Robinson Pipe Cleaning will be out to do some line cleaning and televising on a couple areas that we have been monitoring for issues. One of them would be South Point Boulevard. When we've pulled manholes, we can see that there's grease in there. It's probably been a while since those have been cleaned and televised, so I want to take a look at those. And we've also had a couple of questions on some laterals, so we're going to have the lateral launch come out and take a look at those as well to make sure there's no issues with that. The last item I have for this evening is there's a company called Waterworth Resources. They contacted me regarding their platform for asset management and short and long-term financial planning. They're going to provide me some more information to see if this is something that, you know, might be beneficial to the authority. It can't hurt to take a look at what they offer, you know, and see what's there. But that's all I have for this evening, and I'll entertain any questions if anybody has any.
That last one, Mike, is that more of like a preventive maintenance program for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Life cycling and then, okay, good.
Yeah, basically, what you should do is, they like to see, rule of thumb with DEP, and Kevin, unless something's changed, you can correct me, they like to see the entire system or televised like every 5 years or so. They'd like to see that rolling basis.
Yeah, they like 5% per year, so that you would complete every 20 years, every lineal foot would be televised.
And then that would be a way to build a key map and then pick out areas that, we're having problems with, or older sections, to see what's there that needs, potential rehab replacement. This way, when grants do become available, you can have some shovel-ready projects ready to go for rehabilitation or replacement. And again, that ties into your long-term asset management and long-term planning for how you're going to pay for this.
Would this potentially make any GIS connection at all?
I was going to
Yes.
ask that same
Yes.
question. Okay, good. All right, any other questions for Mike? Okay, do I hear a motion to authorize signing of the 2023 annual waste load management reports for submission to PADEP?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize signing the 2023 audit engagement letter with Mark Turnley. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Are there any correspondence? No. Moving on to number 11, do I hear a motion to approve payment of expenses and transfer of funds?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
I doubt there are any comments from the floor since just you, Jack, tonight. We'll move on to number 13. I'd like to make a motion for executive session tonight for personnel matters, litigation, and property. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, we will be moving into executive session.
Kevin won't need, unless Mike would need Kevin.
Unless there's something that the board has for Kevin, unless he wants to sit in on the potential property.
With the water, also with the water.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, coming out of executive session at 8:20. Do I hear a motion to address Pennsylvania Water Line Extension Proposal for Lawrence Sewage Treatment Plant Project as discussed in executive session?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
And I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Everybody say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
I see you, Darlene.
Yep.